I'm Angus, the creative director of DarkMatter.
Important thing that South Africa needs more people to start businesses, solve problems, create jobs.
What, in your opinion, keeps you inspired to do your job day in, day out?
There's definitely a disconnect between the portrayal of that journey and what people see as getting a lot of media attention.
And you're listening to the Blood, Sweat and Ideas podcast.
No, thanks for having me. I think, well done to you and the team on setting up this podcast. I think we definitely need more of these going on in the country. It's really exciting, and thanks for inviting me. Excited to be here. Yeah.
Well, thanks for saying yes. So we will have a little bit of special effects going on in the background here. So if you wanted to, you got to wait for it to warm up. It is in the process of doing it. What are you doing with that, Celine?
She gave it to me and she hasn't taken it away.
Oh, I thought you were trying to show me something.
I was like, please stop get your laptop off my lap. Sorry, so you just like 5 more minutes? Oh, it's hot.
Okay, cool. So when you hear Blood, Sweat and Ideas, like the name of this podcast, what does that trigger in your mind being an entrepreneur today in South Africa?
I think it's the perseverance of setting out to create something and then seeing it through, which I think I didn't realize this way back when, but ideas are easy. That's the easy part. And that's honestly one of the fun parts for me is the ideas. Ideas are super easy. That's fun to think of things, to conceptualize things, but to go from idea to a business is a whole journey. And I think that journey for me is very akin to the title.
Yeah. That's very true. I mean, you can think of 1,000 ideas while you're in the shower.
Exactly.
An idea is free.
Yeah.
But it's what action do you put behind the idea to turn that idea into something that's tangible, that's used, that people can appreciate. So, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being easy, 10 being painstakingly hard, how hard has the idea of pineapple been?
I'd go with an 8.
An 8?
Yeah. I'd like to say a 10, but I'm sure there's still some things that are going to throw us off course. So let's go with the 8.
Yeah, I think most entrepreneurs would probably agree with you. I think, on a employee net promoter score, an 8, was it 8, 9, and 10 are the ones that are most, the ones that you're really looking at.
Those are the winners.
Yeah, those are the winners. I think there's that quote from Elon Musk that always comes to our mind. I think I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, but I believe he said being an entrepreneur is like eating glass and staring into the void.
Yeah.
Which I think I don't know, have you eaten any glass recently?
I try not to on the daily, but it happens.
Not in your diet. Yeah, I think there's something so important about that, because I think a lot of people today, and I see it on social media, where they want to be the entrepreneur, so they look like the entrepreneur, where they have, it's this social media impersonation of what it is, right? Where they want to look like they've got the best clothes, or they're sitting in the best workspaces, they're driving this really cool car, but none of those factors lead to creating a sustainable business where you're actually providing for people and you're providing for your customers. So how have you avoided that in your role?
I think entrepreneurship is incredibly important to this country, because I think 60% of the employment in the country is SMEs generating that employment. So the vast majority of jobs in the country is coming from SMEs, which make up, I think, 93% of businesses in the countries. So when we think starting a business, it's an incredibly important thing that South Africa needs more people to start businesses, solve problems, create jobs. But there is some level of, I think, especially in the tech startup entrepreneur space, that there's something that's been glamorized about that, which I think comes down to a lot of survivorship bias, because I'm sitting here because Pineapple has survived the last 5-6 years, but 9 out of 10 startups, or probably 7 out of 10 by this time, would have gone out of business.
Yeah, failed. So
we don't get those stories, and we get the stories of successful startups, and people also don't see the shadow of that and what it took to get there.
How many hours, how many years. Yeah.
Exactly. And so there's something about it which has been glamorized, which I think it's cool because maybe it promotes it, but at the same time I think people need to understand what they're in for. So I think there's definitely an aspect to it which has been maybe inflated in media, but it also is incredibly important. And I think the other part, which is maybe a misrepresentation is when we think of successful startup founders, you think of like the Zuckerbergs, the Evan Spiegels,
the big names,
Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and those guys are outliers. Like the data suggests that your successful startup founder is 45 years old. So the idea of starting this billion-dollar company in your 20s, it's very unlikely. Like it is. That's not to say don't try, because I think there's a lot of merit in trying as well. Whether it succeed or fail, you're going to come away richer from the experience. But there's definitely a disconnect between the portrayal of that journey and what people see as getting a lot of media attention versus, I think, what the reality is.
I think the idea that you're just going to have this idea, and because it's the right time, I think timing obviously is a whole nother ball game. It's so important to any business being successful. But at the time you have this idea and you just float it out there and it's going to elevate into something like that. I mean, majority of the time it's not, right? It's never going to get to that level.
I mean, that's what the statistics say. I think everyone should, you want to have the self-belief. I don't think anyone should enter and go,
if you're not
I'm probably going to fail, but hey, let's give it a go. Like you want to have self-belief and go, I'm gonna take whatever I need to do to make this work and make it a success. And that's what we do. But at the same time, like, it's a reality that there's very real chance of failure. And that's just something like that one needs to be cognizant of.
The self-deprecating entrepreneur doesn't get as far as the optimistic one. If there are any self-deprecating entrepreneurs, we'd love to have you on the show, see how you guys have done it. Blood, sweat, ideas, and tears probably.
And
more
tears,
so.
a lot of tears.
I think what you also said is, you said 93% of South African businesses are startups.
Or SMEs.
SMEs. So do you feel like the current climate or landscape within South Africa allows those SMEs to prosper and kick on and get past that 10-year mark?
Look, I think yes and no. I mean, the fact that 93% are SMEs and that 60% of our employment comes from that space is signal that, yes, there's something working in that space. But I also think, having spent some time in the US and part of that startup sort of ecosystem there's definitely a lot of things to still build on here. A lot of support structures, a lot more of harnessing innovation, like supporting it, funding it. I think the funding of maybe on the tech startup and VC side has definitely come a long way since when we started. But when I was there, it's like a different ball game. There's like easy access to grants and things to get you started if you're working on something. And I think there's a lot of support locally as well, from your city, from your state.
Because it's incentivized, right?
Exactly.
It's incentivized for your business to start within that state, so then you can get the tax for them.
Exactly. So, and I think there's something really interesting about that competitive state system there that drives that. Whereas here, it's a little bit different. We have like a centralized tax service nationally. So I think there's definitely a lot to do to help SMEs prosper, but it is the lifeblood of our economy.
I agree.
The celebration.
When you say something profound, you get the smoke.
Yeah, you get the smoke machine. It's like those little, what are those things when you pop the string? So, let me speak into the mic. So, I mean, you went to America. I mean, that was what, about a year or so ago? 2 years?
3 years ago, yeah.
That was what, during COVID?
Yeah, well, just before COVID.
Just before COVID.
Yeah.
So, like, what are the biggest lessons that you've learned from being in that environment that you've brought over to the Pineapple? Jeez.
Now we're really setting the mood here.
What kind of podcast is this?
Look, the American environment was really interesting to sort of witness firsthand, because I think that's also where a lot of this glamorization comes from.
Yeah.
And there's the American dream, but the ecosystem's massive. So like your chances of some level of success are probably a bit higher, because there's a lot of things that have been done in the last 20, 30 years to support startups, because the economy has benefits to so much from companies that were startups. So I mean, like the amount of money that Google, Facebook and the likes add to that economy and bring to the aura of the American economy is insanely valuable.
Yeah.
So they've done a lot they've seen the success of it, and so they've now done a lot to bridge any gaps that there were. But I think one of the more interesting things I realized there is that South Africans are naturally conservative, which I suppose we know, but especially when it comes to pitching and putting ideas out there, like, I mean, we at Pineapple are incredibly conservative. We speak the truth. We don't make promises to investors or anyone that aren't true, or things that, you know, we haven't got there yet, but we're going to pretend we have. And so I realized there that there's probably a better balance to find between being prudent and conservative versus being confident, because also people want to feed off your confidence.
Yeah.
Like, they want to know this is where you're going, and you dead set and confident that you're going to get there, even if it's still a way away. I think where maybe there's a bit of a disconnect there, and that's where I suppose some of these crazy stories like Theranos and the likes come from.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Is that they go over to the dark side.
Almost
It's like
way too confident.
confidence to the point of
ego?
trickery.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was definitely a takeout from the US.
That's huge. I think, this is the whole point of this conversation, is so people can hear that. I mean, you had to go and walk, learn, spend the money. I mean, you were there for how long? How many months?
About 8 months.
8 months. And now you get that snapshot takeaway. So confidence is key, more than just business. I think that's also a very true statement. And then I think, yeah, like you said, the overconfidence, the dark side of it. And I think that like also plays to ego of it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's, like you said, you had the outliers, and maybe those people, like, for example, like a Steve Jobs, he had an insane ego, but he's an outlier of what he could achieve. And I think maybe a big important lesson for many entrepreneurs would be void your ego.
Yeah.
I think leaning too much into that, and then not being able to understand or listen or know, like, you don't know everything. Like, it's impossible for you, right?
And I think that's like that ego component. When you watch these documentaries on the likes of Theranos and stuff, you see there wasn't the intention to deceive.
No,
there was an honorable mission at hand, and there was some misrepresentation. But it's the ego that gets the better of you, and it's that glamorization of this lifestyle. Like, I'm a successful startup founder, and we're a unicorn billion-dollar company, and now I've got to make sure that we stay that way, even if we haven't had the merit to actually be there.
Yeah.
And it's that ego, that sort of image that you need to project, which starts to create this very toxic persona of what you're willing to do and the lengths you're willing to go to keep it that way.
I believe I can't remember her name at the top of my head, but I believe she changed her voice. Like, she like literally lowered her voice. Like, they've shown how over the course of her, like, you know, her rounds of funding, you know, pitches and presentations, her voice got like deeper or like lower.
Yeah.
But again, it comes full circle to like the over glamorization of it. So like social media paint this persona of what entrepreneurship could be, and then you're not doing it for the right reasons. You're just trying to be seen as the Fortune 500 Forbes list, you know, great mind of this era. Meanwhile, you're creating a product that is lying about the results, right?
Exactly.
It wasn't ever going, I mean, I remember when I saw that, they were saying like it was never even going to be able to do what they had set out to do. And now not being able to admit that, then they just continued the facade.
Exactly. And I think like you dig yourself a hole.
Yeah.
It's the same with any big corporate scandals and frauds. Is like, it never starts out with the intention of this long-term deception, but it's always like, we venture into the dark side, and now like, oh, we ventured there last year, so let's just do it again and do it again.
You keep pushing it.
You keep pushing that boundary
Yeah.
until like there's no recovery from
Yeah.
that. And I think it's quite scary, because that is driven, as you say, by a lot of ego and about this image and about what's expected. And sometimes we just have to say, cool guys, we didn't get there of what's expected, let's pivot. And that's like an invaluable skill to say, we need to pivot, like we need to change up what we're doing. This was the mission, and maybe one day we'll get there, but we're not there now, and let's like acknowledge that and move on.
But don't you think that comes down to having the right type of team around you? So like almost not having sycophants, which are just always agreeing and saying yes and yes and yes. Like, it's about, you know, maybe you can tell us about your guys' team dynamics at Pineapple. Like, who is the one that's, I mean, I don't want to say you guys are going to the dark side, but who's the one that keeps bringing you to the light?
Yeah, I think we were incredibly fortunate with our founding team, and I think like the team, so the statistics also say that the largest reason for failure in a startup is the team dynamics. People can't get along. And I mean, we've seen that firsthand with various companies and teams we've worked with. And I think we were incredibly fortunate, myself, Manus, and Da, and Sizwe. We all really got along. We had the same value systems. We're very pragmatic decision makers, and that's been invaluable to just be able to sit here, say, okay, I believe in X, you believe in Y. This isn't personal. I'm not attached to X, and you shouldn't be attached to Y. We both just want what's best for the business. So let's go and have a pragmatic debate about the merits of X and the merits of Y.
Yeah.
And let's come to a collective decision on which route we go down. And whichever decision we come to, it's not about, hey, our one, we went with X, or like, oh, Gus, your Y is shit. It's like we...
So we are swearing on this podcast. Is that what we're doing?
Can I edit that? But it's like we all doing this for a collective reason, and so there's no ego involved.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. Exactly. The pragmatism is void of ego. It comes down to the right decision at the right time to make for the business, so it can kick on to the next level. Okay, so we've just had a break. So if things have been moved around, then they can see why. Going back to the American topic, I think a big part of the success of their economy is the fact that they invest so much time, resources, and money into different businesses or competing businesses. How did you find the insurance industry competition while you were there in America? And then how do you relate that back to South Africa? Are we like premature in that regard? Is there enough this side? Like what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I think America, interestingly enough, my take on it was less competitive from an insurance perspective than South Africa. And I think that's maybe one of the few industries where I can say that. But insurance in South Africa is incredibly competitive and innovative. South African insurance companies are known around the world for doing innovative things. Like Vitality is a global concept. Yeah. People talk about it all over the world at insurance conferences. There's a lot of firsts that have come out of South African financial services and particularly insurance. And it's an incredibly competitive market. And I think competition drives innovation. Because you've got to find ways to breach that market. So I would say my very layman assessment of the dynamics between the US and SA, particularly for insurance, is that I would say, given the sort of population targets in South Africa that you're targeting with insurance products, South Africa is a lot more competitive.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great segue into the fact that you've been doing one hell of a marketing campaign. I think on behalf of every single car driver or commuter on the South African roads, we've thoroughly enjoyed Pineapple's multiple billboards that have popped up around the country. I think it's been, in my personal opinion, a slam dunk from how you guys just approached it. I think for me, your campaign, it was like sentient. You're aware of yourself being in insurance, which we know is a grudge purchase for a lot of consumers, for a lot of people. And there were also at a time today where I feel people like we are aware of when we are being advertised to. So not only were you cognizant of the fact that you were selling insurance, but you were cognizant of the fact that you were selling it through an advert, which I think consumers today have just had enough of, right? We've got to a point where it's like an overload of sensory overload and like a bombardment of so many things. And what was really quite cool to see is from when you guys started it with your billboard campaign, how your competitors reacted and had to throw their hat into the ring to also now add to this, what I must say, a really fun commute these days. Like it's almost like what you guys should do, maybe this is an external idea or additional, is, when you go on Safari and you get those like little booklets and you tick off.
Billboard bingo.
Yeah, billboard bingo, exactly. Because I think what's also kept yours so fresh and exciting is that you've moved them around a lot. So like a lot of the time you'll see something different on your commute, which I think keeps the momentum of the idea. what are your thoughts on your guys' campaign? Like, has it been a success in your guys? Have you got an ROI?
Yeah, no, it's been a really interesting journey. Like our first above the line venture with the billboards. Huge credit to Nicole, who's our CMO, and Halo she worked with. So they've been very close to it. I can't take much credit for it, but it's been really exciting to be a part of and to see the development of that campaign. I think it was a risky campaign, like it definitely was, because people are used to, if you're selling me insurance, tell me what it is you're selling. We sell car insurance. How much is it going to cost me? Why should I listen to you? And all of those things and those assumptions we just kind of threw out the window. And this was our brand's first entrance into this above the line space. So usually on your first entrance, you're going to try and link your brand to your product, the product benefits and all of that. And we took a completely different approach and it worked out. So it was a risk, but it really worked out. And I think it's rooted in this thesis of have fun with marketing and also be memorable when you can be memorable.
Yeah.
Because in a space like insurance where everyone's shouting so loud for your attention and a new brand now entering that arena, how do you get attention? Do you just also try and shout very loud or do you do something different?
Yeah.
And I once read this book by a guy named Richard Mulholland.
Okay.
And he's a South African guy, really cool public speaker.
Yeah, he owns Missing Link.
Yes. And the book was called Legicide. And my big takeout, I'm not an avid reader. It's something I'm trying to work on. But my big takeout, I actually completed that book. And my big takeout there was he keeps putting across this theme of where you can be different and be memorable, just do it, even if it's something bizarre. Like this podcast with the smoke machine. That's something bizarre, but it's going to be memorable. And when I think of like the golden age of TV and when we were kids and the broadband speeds were dial up, you weren't going to watch any videos on the internet. And so you're watching TV, and we didn't have DSTV for a while, so it was SABC 1, 2, 3 and ETV. So there was a lot of ads. And I used to enjoy the ads.
I agree. Yeah.
And like the ones which were memorable were like you'd get the ones which are just amazing storytelling. Like those Alan Gray would release, I think, 1 or 2 a year. And it was just like the spectacular moving story. And you're like, wow, that was cool.
Hits you right in the feels. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you just get these bizarre ones which are they're slightly humorous, but they're more even just bizarre. But they just stand out like Cremora. It's not inside, it's on top.
Yeah.
And everyone knows that. But when you rewatch it, you're like, it's not that funny. But it's bizarre, and it works. It wasn't like them saying, hey, buy Cremora because it's a milk alternative, and it's a powder, and it doesn't need to go in the fridge, and it's long shelf life, and just as creamy, and you please buy Cremora. And like, there it is. And you're like, okay, cool, thanks for the information. It's like just this dude, where's the Cremora? So we told he really loves it, and there must be a reason for that. And it's not inside the fridge; it's on top. So in some ways, it's communicating to you the product, but like in this bizarre, humorous way, which just got everyone's attention.
It lives on the zeitgeist.
Exactly, and I think of like there's a few examples which come to mind there. There's also, I don't know if it's just me, but there was this Eros ad when I was a kid on like. It was like mango, lemon, lychee, passion fruit, guava.
I actually know the girl who was one of those fruits.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like a claim to fame. She's like, I was the mango.
That's one to put on your LinkedIn profile.
I'm telling you, that's top of the CV.
I was
right
actually
there.
guava in the Oros ads.
I'm not sure if you know me, but you've definitely heard me.
Yeah. Let me give it a go, guava.
Yeah, you remember when I said, let me just
and if you think of that, it's like it's just the most bizarre thing. Like we're just gonna play a marimba of Oros men with different colors, and people are gonna remember it, and everyone remembers it. And so I think there's this thing of be memorable to get that awareness initially. And yes, obviously at some point in time you need to educate people
100%.
on what you do. But I think for us it was important that our first entry into the above the line space was something that gave our brand personality and was memorable in a space which is incredibly competitive. And I think the team did insanely well to achieve that. Like there were times I wasn't convinced of some of the billboards that were going up, and I was like, I think that's going to go over people's heads, but like it worked. And I think something which was really an awesome outcome out of that was also the conversation it spurred.
100%.
Because there was a lot of debate among you marketing folks who were like, oh, is this shit? Is this good?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what they do, but now I'm intrigued. Now I do know who they are now. And there was like a huge amount of debate to the point.
Huge amount of earned media for you guys from that side. Like, I mean, you guys were trending for so long across, I mean, I predominantly use LinkedIn, but across LinkedIn, I mean, those posts, I went and did a few of my own personal posts where I captured the one. I think the one that I got the most feedback on was you had just, it said it was your competitor's billboard, and then you strategically placed one just behind it or in front of it, and it said, never phone a broker pineapple either. Yeah. And I mean, that just popped off, because I think it just comes back to you were having fun. You were playing with the environment and using space and time to create that message and get people to realize, like, your pineapple's also just here. You know?
Exactly. And I think the conversation around it in itself was a success of that whole campaign, because even if every single person who works in marketing knows who you are, that's a pretty big audience.
Huge.
So yeah, I think the campaign did phenomenally well. I think it definitely met its objectives in terms of putting our brand out there in a light that we're proud to be a part of. And also being trendy and starting a conversation, being different.
Yeah, I think it also, like, in its essence, it speaks back to your target market too, right? I mean, if anyone hasn't used Pineapple's app, like, it's very much geared towards a younger generation. I mean, you use a lot of emojis to, like, convey to communicate how to use the app there. And I think just the way in which you went about everything in this campaign, it just spoke and resonated with your target audience. And that's maybe why I love it. I was already a customer, and if I wasn't, it would have definitely made me consider changing, because it's something that just gripped me personally. Like, it was just, I mean, I've got some here. I don't know what your favorites were, but these are some of the ones that I really loved. 9 out of 10 employees recommend Pineapple. What the fuck, Jim? Like, I just love that. It's like, it's almost like those old, those toothpaste ads, like, recommended by 9 out of 10 dentists. Like, okay, firstly, who are these dentists and which one is not saying it is? So it was just clever to poke fun at it. And I think, like, you hit so many things on the head that it's like, you're doing marketing for a reason. It's to stand out, right? You want to be distinctive and memorable. And you've certainly elevated a standard in which other, not just insurers will need to match, but I think most businesses that are going to do above the line marketing, billboards, they're going to have to think twice about what they do and how they say it. So yeah, in the break, we were just talking about your guys' campaigns, and as you just helped me remember, so Jan Smuts, Bolton, driving down Jan Smuts, and in the distance, you see this very long, narrow billboard, and it says, "Can you even read this insurance ad?" And as soon as, like, I remember I was driving and I just saw, like, bits and pieces, but immediately I recognized it was Pineapple from the color, from the fact that it was all, like, text-based. But just that line, "Can you even read this insurance ad?" It just goes back to what I was saying. It's aware, you guys are aware of yourselves, right? And I just thought that was just, it really made me chuckle in the car. Something so flippant as, can you read this? Because it's a terrible billboard position. It's awful. So what's the story with that one?
There's quite a cool story. There was a bit of irony there, as you probably have picked up, and there was that billboard open. So myself, Nicole, and Marnus actually painstakingly went through the inventory of all the billboard providers ourselves and started, like, picking out what we like and what we don't like, and it was an incredibly daunting task, but we're very happy we did it, because I think it's incredibly important to get the right positions 100%. And stuff. And so that one was available, and it's massive. Like, long. Like, and it's so, like, it's very high up, but the actual height of the lettering and everything, it's a massive billboard.
Sure.
But it has this problem that Jan Smuts goes downhill, and only at the top can you actually read the whole thing. And so when we're looking at it, I think either Nicole or Dean from the agency was like, this is a shocking billboard. You can never read it on that road unless you're on the top of the hill. And we're like, well, that's that's got to be the copy
That's
then.
the
Like,
copy,
can you
yeah.
even read it?
Yeah.
And one of the cool things is that whenever you're in a raised position in Rosebank, in one of the high rises or like hotels or whatever, it's the only thing you can read. So it's like
the
it's
irony
got that
is-
very cool
yeah.
aspect to it. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's just a great example of a brand using space and time to its benefit. Like knowing that the space is 90% of the time from the ground, not able to see. And then just the copy there, it just speaks directly to what you're actually trying to achieve. Like for me, that one encompasses the whole campaign. It's like the ribbon that ties it all together, because it's so smart. And like it's taking, and I think that's a lot of the time people don't utilize that. It's like if something goes wrong, it's like lean into it, utilize it. Don't try and like erase the mistake. Rather say, hey, we made a mistake and we're utilizing it to our advantage. Like the fact that we just had Tana in here spraying smoke, like keep it in. What does it hurt? Like we're all people. We're trying to create something that's fun, engaging, that's different. So why not introduce you to our team one video, one spray of the smoke at a time?
Yeah, and as you say, like I think that was a powerful part of the campaign is being self-deprecating.
100%.
That was one of the boxes where like we have to be self-deprecating because you don't want to go out there and start making fun of other people. Like I think that doesn't speak to you and your character. Like I think
ego.
everyone who has really a good character and a strong character can make fun of themselves.
Yeah.
I can go, hey, this was a stupid billboard position, so let's make fun of it.
Yeah.
And that was definitely one of the criteria for the campaign.
Well, I think you and Dean and the Halo team and Nicole and Manus, well, everyone combined has ticked off all the boxes. I don't know how many boxes there were, but you've ticked them off superbly. So
Thanks.
Again, on behalf of all commuters around South Africa, we thank you and applaud you. And I think there's going to be plenty of awards coming your guys' way.
Thanks.
And I'm excited to see what the next part of this campaign looks like. I'm sure you guys have got that under lock and key. So I'll look out for it.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah. You heard it here first.
And I think for us, like it needed to be fun. It needed to fit with our ethos as a brand, which is, yes, we do insurance and we're credible in people who do insurance, but we're also here to do it differently.
Yeah.
And that's what we are trying to speak to in the billboard campaign. And I think, look, another reason for why we ventured there is a level of credibility which a consumer wants from a company which they're going to trust with their assets to insure them. And billboards do help you get that credibility. Before that, our presence had been predominantly just online, digital, in different realms in the digital world. But there's something about a physical, tangible, seeing your brand on a big billboard that you're like, okay, like, firstly, you've got to make sure they see you, which is, and then secondly, it's like, okay, like, this is credible. These guys, they're not just some scam trying to insure us. Like, this is a credible business that's doing what they need to do.
It builds a huge level of trust. Like you said, it makes it tangible. It's seen. And then I believe you guys also sponsored in the SA20, and you guys got some space there on side the actual screen. You had Pineapple. So what was that like? How was that? How has that helped Pineapple's branding?
Yeah, I think that was incredibly exciting. I think, again, I can't take much credit for that. You can see why I'm not working in the marketing space of things, but it's like...
We've got the wrong person on this podcast, clearly.
But I remember when co-founder Manus, he was sort of driving that, and he pitched the idea of, let's sponsor this cricket tournament. And I don't know too much about cricket. I was like, do people still watch cricket? Like, is that still a popular sport? And I think cricket at the time had taken a bit of a dive in terms of audience, people wanting to watch the Proteas. I think there was a lot of sort of negative press and scandals around Cricket South Africa and a lot of stuff which was maybe turning people off the sport. And so it was quite a big decision to say, let's sponsor this new tournament that hasn't been done before. We don't know what the viewership's going to be like. We don't know anything. But let's take a gamble because the big corporates are a bit scared of it.
Yeah.
Like they,
there's an
they don't know.
opportunity. There's a blue ocean right now.
Exactly. And it worked out phenomenally well. I think it was a really cool sort of canvas for our brand as well to get into that space. It was our first appearance on TV. And the tournament itself did incredibly well. It attracted a lot of viewership, and we, of course, benefited from that.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, I don't know when was it, February? It must have been February, early January, or late January,
I think mid-Jan to late.
A lot of people just wanted to get tickets. I mean, the buzz around it. And I think it's also testament to, and then maybe this is actually a really good analogy for Pineapple, is T20 cricket, is you've taken a very outdated, obsolete industry like test cricket, insurance, and you've come with a exciting, fun, engaging way to make it faster, snappier, fun, and just like a cool user experience for you to be in control of what you're insuring and how you do it. And that's, T20, 20 overs. They make it really enjoyable. There's cheerleaders, there's five like flamethrowers and fireworks, which is obviously completely different to the original format of 5 days, which is drawn out, long, boring. So I think, it matches actually quite well into your guys, the market of what you're trying to capture in the insurance space.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, now that you draw that analogy, I think it's also like you're taking something which has a lot of formality to it, and you're kind of breaking that boundary of the formality. Like test cricket is very formal as a game. You have to look a certain way, dress a certain way. There's like a lot of formality around it. And now you have this SA20 and there's fireworks going off and there's cheerleaders and there's flamethrowers and loud music, and it's a shorter format, more exciting. And I think that definitely speaks to us as a brand.
That's very cool. So let's take it back to 2018. You guys create Pineapple, right? It's now 2023. That's 6 years on. Did you imagine the business to being at this point in time? Like, have you surpassed expectations? Can you even go back that far to imagine where you would have been in, say, 5 years' time? Have you reached anything? Have you reached targets, goals? Yeah,
look, I think I have to think back, but I definitely think we've surpassed expectations. I remember making a bet not a bet, but I said, guys, if we reach, not going to mention the number of policyholders, but I'll do a dance for you. And I'm very close to doing that dance. Okay. So like everyone, they haven't forgotten from 5 years ago when I made that promise.
Your vision board. Get Matthew to dance. Can we get a sneak peek? Can you?
No. So I think, yes, we've definitely, I think the business in a lot of our value drivers has exceeded our expectations, but I think things are never a straight line. No. And that's been an interesting journey. It's like things never go just straight line, cool, steady trajectory. It's a roller coaster. You like dive down, then you jump up, you dive down, and you jump up, and there's like these various step changes. And I think there's often this thing of you underestimate or you overestimate what you can do in a short space of time, so like 6 months.
Yeah.
But you underestimate what you can do in like 3 years.
The longer period,
and I think, it definitely speaks true.
So now, with that said, what is your vision for Pineapple in the year 2033, so 10 years from today?
Look, I think we want to be the predominant insurance brand in the country. There's stiff competition, but I think we're going to get there, and even potentially beyond the country. So I think that's the vision, that's the ultimate goal. That's where we're heading.
Would it be across Africa or going overseas?
I think both.
Okay.
So it has been a successful trajectory of South African insurance companies venturing to Europe. King Price has gone to Europe now. Outsurance, very successful in Australia, so it's Telesure. They just announced they're going to Ireland. So I think there's a good track record. Discovery's gone all over with Vitality, a bit of a different model, where they sort of licensing their tech and IP, but they've done successfully in the UK, in China, in Germany, in the US, and I think that's definitely a path that we want to see Pineapple travel as well.
That's awesome. So there's like a blueprint that is being laid by South African businesses. Absolutely. To take on the world, and then Pineapple's next.
Absolutely.
Maybe just so we're 20 minutes? Not.
2 minutes.
Okay. Maybe just so for the rest of the world to understand, maybe you can just tell us the meaning of why you call pineapple pineapple, because I think it's quite an interesting story, because I don't think a lot of people know, firstly, how a pineapple grows, and secondly, that it's actually a berry. Like,
Yeah, look, I was surprised to find that out myself, but it's a very cool. Like, so what a lot of people don't know is that a pineapple isn't just the single fruit. We buy it as a single fruit, but it's a collection of berries. So each of those little knobs on a pineapple is an individual berry. And the reason why they come together in that structure is quite akin to insurance, where these berries are trying to make it to the ground and not be picked off by birds and eaten. And so they come together in this very rough structure, this very hardy structure, so that they can reach their objective and protect one another, which is very akin to insurance, where people are coming together as a community. We're all paying premiums, and then if something unfortunate happens to you, you're getting the benefit of that because there's this community around you that's inherently protecting you.
so now let's bring it back to maybe you as an entrepreneur, for those listening that want to get into the seat one day and, you know, own a company and have the vision to go overseas and create something that's just going to obviously be an impactful business, not just for South Africans, but for the world. What, in your opinion, keeps you like inspired to do your job day in, day out?
Yeah, look, I would be lying if I said I'm inspired all the time. I don't think I've ever met someone who's inspired all the time. I'm motivated. I think the things that motivate me are, you know, my own personal values and my drive to succeed and to get what I want to get out of this journey, in helping others and showcasing what South African businesses can do, but also to create a place of employment. I think this country needs jobs. We need people to grow. We've been very cognizant of hiring people with very little experience in some of the roles and watch them flourish. And we've had some like really awesome moving stories around that in the business. And I think like that's the kind of thing that motivates you. Like we've got to do more of this. Like we're here for a purpose, and it's not just let's make a successful business. It's here like for a purpose for the country and for the people in the country, and we have a responsibility to do that. What inspires me is I'm inspired by new things. Like I love new tech, like the AI revolution that the world is sort of on the precipice of is like really that's exciting me a lot. Like that's keeping me up at night for good reasons. And for bad reasons. I think it's scary in the same breath, but it's incredibly exciting. So those are the kind of things that inspire me, is like these inflection points, both in the business and in like the macro landscape of the economy and the world. And I think there's a lot of that's coming, and I'm incredibly excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are well versed to utilize these new developments as well and plug it into your existing framework and existing environment to completely leverage and go beyond.
Absolutely. I think I'd be surprised if like any businesses didn't feel like that at the moment. I think there's huge scope to be more efficient, to increase productivity, to really just like do a lot more than you could with less. And I think, look, there's also some scary aspects of it. I mean, I've been thinking about this topic a lot, as you probably can catch on. But it's like, I think there's going to be a fundamental shift in what we value as people in terms of skill sets and technical skills particularly. I can't think of any technical role, even coming from a very technical role in my past, which is like actuarial mathematics. And I can't think of any role which AI over probably a very short time horizon now won't be better at, because it's collating all the information where you might have a subset. So I think there's going to be a massive shift in society around what we value as a skill set.
Where do we put our energy into
exactly
utilizing that? I mean, GPT-4, the pool of knowledge or data points that it can pull from is like, if this was ChatGPT 3.5, ChatGPT 4 is like this. It's mind-boggling how much more it's going to be learning from right?
Absolutely. And they just announced that there's like a plugin that's going to allow it to reference live information on the web,
Crazy.
which is probably the main missing component in that use case right now. And that's one of many tools out there. And I think what's really been mind-blowing for me, and I was thinking about this the other day, and I still can't wrap my head around it. So GPT-1, which is the first iteration from OpenAI, all it could really do was identify parts of a sentence and say, this is a noun, this is a verb, like identify. It couldn't really understand the context. Then they got to a point where it could maybe like start to understand context. Then it could start to understand if there was a problem to be solved in the context. And now it can solve the problem from like very intricate links between words and sentences and everything. And fundamentally, what that model's doing, its only purpose is to predict the next character. So in English, to predict the next letter.
Yeah.
That's all. It's not to like formulate this whole strategy. It's literally to predict the next character.
So when it leads on from one, it's leading into the next, into the next, into the next.
And it's just been fed so much data that it's powered to predict the next character and string together characters that are contextual, that are relevant to the questions or whatever.
The prompt,
is amazing. And what's really quite mind-blowing around that is, so now recently, I think it was Stanford computer science students, they took Llama, which is Facebook's large language model, and they combined it with GPT, ChatGPT, and they made it more efficient to the point where you can now host it on any device, pretty much a device with 4 gigs of RAM, which is all of our devices now. And so a mate of mine and myself, we were playing around with this, and I was looking at, you can see your task manager and how much RAM something is consuming. So hosted this thing, essentially ChatGPT, on his computer. It's consuming about 1 gig of RAM.
Okay.
Right. So that's about the information of a movie.
Yeah.
But you could ask it anything. I could ask it what happened in season 4, episode 6 of Friends, and it would spit out the right answer.
Is that still connected to the internet?
No.
So it's in your device.
Exactly.
It's physically.
And that's the most mind-blowing thing, is something that has the ability to answer questions on petabytes and petabytes worth of data.
It's a lot of zeros for anyone wondering how many petabytes there are. It's like to the 7 something.
Something crazy like that. And it has all of this data, but it's not stored anywhere, and it's all just condensed into this predictive algorithm. So this 1 gigabyte of RAM that it's using on your computer essentially contains, to a very high degree of accuracy, the world's data in it. Which is just completely mind-blowing. And so like you extrapolate that journey of OpenAI, when they first launched, the first GPT was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So now you extrapolate that,
of that,
10 years ago, the only thing we were doing in AI was trying to identify cats.
Yeah.
Putting up a picture and saying, does this contain a cat?
Yeah.
And now we're here. So now, like, if you think about that acceleration and that velocity change,
how steep is that graph going?
Where do we go next? And what happens in the next 5 years and the 5 years after that? And I think, like, it's incredibly exciting to be alive right now.
It's extremely exciting. I even use ChatGPT for some of the questions that I'm not even asking you. And just so I think there's still a lot of work to be done on it. And I think the importance of the human element to take what it's given and then still add and be aware of what you're actually trying to achieve with the content that you've been given, right? I think it's fundamental that there's that human approach still. Like, even if you look at something like Midjourney, for example, you can create a piece of art, but there's going to be elements within the artwork that's being pumped out by Midjourney that's not going to look quite right. Like words, lettering never works. Hands and fingers, it's still not there. Which I think when you are an artist, I think they say hands are sometimes the hardest things to actually paint or draw. So maybe there's actually even a true reflection of humanism in that. But I think for people like listening to this, I think there's opportunities to leverage these tools to become even, smarter with it, right? It's not doom and gloom. It's how does this now make me more efficient and proactive and better all around at my job?
Exactly. I think that's a great way of looking at it, because I think a lot of people are looking at it with fear and apprehension. And yes, there's things which we don't know what we don't know. And like we could get very philosophical and start to unpack the worst case scenarios, but there's also the best case scenarios. And there's also the right now. And the right now for me is like, let's treat it as an insanely useful tool.
Yeah.
It's the same as me going from having to do arithmetic on a piece of paper to having a calculator. And now, like, yes, that skill set's still valuable. I still need to know what to put into the calculator.
It's the prompt.
But it's going to reduce my time of actually having to do calculations. And then the next step, Excel.
Yeah.
You know, and now we're here to ChatGPT, and it's going to write my data queries for me, and that's exciting. But it's like, I still need to know what to ask it. I still need to coordinate things. And so seeing it as an empowering tool rather than this something that's going to like try and take over your job, I think is definitely the right way to look at it.
It brings back to like the Industrial Revolution. Have you ever heard of the story of the Luddites in the UK? Yeah. So when the Industrial Revolution obviously occurred, you now had steam-powered engines, which then allowed you to work faster, more efficiently, because you now had like a power source. It wasn't just manual labor. And the Luddites were the group of people that went and smashed the machines because like, oh, this is taking our jobs away. Which, yes, it does, but you need a new set of skills to now service those machines, to build those machines, to operate the machines. So like this fear, and I mean, you can even go back to a more recent example of Uber, right? The taxi drivers up in arms about this, but they also replaced a previous job or previous industry. And now Uber is getting up in arms about self-driving cars. So there's this constant like flow of generation to generation to generation. But at the end of the day, we're going to be utilizing these tools. And I think being positive towards these things is also very important, right? Like you can have the Terminator mindset, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger coming through the door looking for, what's her name? Connor. Joan Connor? Connors, yeah. Maybe it gets there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know.
But not right now. Not at least for another 2 weeks at this rate.
Exactly. And I think the important thing about that and the analogy to, you know, electrification of the world and, you know, steam-powered machines and factories and stuff is that the output and the overall value that the world generates always increases from this. It's not like, oh, now we do less or we just... Because what people don't anticipate is the new services that can be produced
from it.
It's the same with the internet. When the internet first came around, it was like, great, I can now send post via this digital means. And it starts with all the use cases of doing what I do currently, send flowers. Then we have Netflix, first e-commerce business in SA, and like,
was that the first?
I think they were the first.
It was not eBay, Bid or Buy. Well, it doesn't matter.
Maybe.
No. We'll fact check this.
Yeah.
We'll get ChatGPT4 on it.
Yeah.
Reference this.
And then, so you have this sort of phase where at first you're using this tool to either recreate or do things that people already engage with more efficiently. So now it's like, we all go to auction, so let's just make an auction place, you know, eBay. And there's all of these startups which came around, and it's like, ooh. And I mean, they're massively successful now. Amazon is a shop. Digital shop.
Started off selling books.
Exactly. And you start with that, and then you move on to what does this enable? Now that everyone's on the internet, now we can do things like Facebook, we can do things like Uber and Airbnb, where you're connecting like things which you didn't even imagine that was a possibility, because beforehand it wasn't a possibility. There wasn't that happening. So you're not just using the internet to recreate or do something that was existing more efficiently, but now it's creating brand new services and value for the world. And I think that's probably the trajectory that AI is going to take. Is right now, we're all looking at these tools and using them and going, oh, like, let me write my interview questions. I should have written my answers on it.
You should have just pumped it in.
Just come here with
AI
a script.
to AI. Yeah.
We can just leave. And but then at some point, it's going to switch over to what does it enable that we've never thought of before. And that's going to be the very exciting time.
Yeah, it's all generational. I remember watching a YouTube video, and this guy was discussing how when the newspaper came out, right? So through the printing press, parents in those times would get frustrated with their children because they were ingrained in just reading the newspaper, and they couldn't understand it because back then you would have printed books, and then the newspaper turned into magazines, and the magazines turned into television, and then television has turned into mobile phones. Yet we're all consuming the same like stream of information. We're utilizing these tools today to get knowledge, to gain understanding of what's happening currently in the world. But the generation before us will never understand why you're using that. Like, you should be using the newspaper, you should be using the book, you should be using the radio, you should be using the television. Now it's TikTok. Now we're getting huge amounts of information, and I think that's what scares like the older generation, is that they don't understand that TikTok goes beyond just these challenges and these dance. Like, if you want to curate your feed to be predominantly infotainment around, I don't know, cryptocurrencies or AI, based on the conversation we're having, you can do that, and you can have content creators that are streaming that directly to you, so you can enhance your learnings. Like, think about that, and like we just spoke about it now, the steep curve of which AI is giving us. Like, you can learn information like that today.
Absolutely. I think there's always seems to be the opposition to change. And change is often seen as this bad thing because, like, as humans, we programmed in our DNA because we want to survive to stay in the safe place.
Yeah.
Like, this is, this little area here, it gives us crops, it gives us berries, this is the safe place. Let's not move and see what's beyond the hill there, because what if that's dangerous? So you program to stay there. But the reason we've also been able to thrive as a society is
we expanded.
We go, well, I do want to know what's there. It's curiosity. Like, the curiosity gets the better of us, and I wonder what is possible if I do this. And like, I mean, I was hesitant of going on TikTok because of all I had the impression of, okay, it's these dances and whatever. And now I enjoy TikTok. I get so much great content from it. I'm like, I've curated my feed where it's stuff I'm interested in. It's bite size, which is, for me, works better than reading a book.
Goes back to our attention spans.
And like, there's a lot of value in it. So as much as, it can be used in maybe an unproductive way if you're just watching people dance all day, but hey, maybe you're learning to dance. But like,
well, hey, you've got to get your dance moves. You've got to get some dance moves later on.
Now you know what I've curated in my feed. But like, at the same time, you can get so much value from these things in a more efficient medium. And that's where, like, the world just keeps progressing to be more efficient, more user friendly, because we as people try to design things that are doing that.
Yeah, 100%. It's all designed for the end consumer, right? And that's what you guys have done with Pineapple so expertly. You've created an easy to use download app, which as soon as you get on, firstly, it identifies what phone you're using, so you can insure your phone right off the bat, which is wildly impressive. And then it's simply just going and taking a photo of your goods or your assets, and then taking it, saying what the cost is, do you have the receipt, and it's done. I'm obviously simplifying it, but it is that simple. It Absolutely. Really is.
Yeah, like, we've spent a lot of our time on simplifying the insurance journey when, like, our vehicle insurance quoting processes are a pain. You sit on the phone for 45 minutes giving, like, these undue details, and a lot of the time we found when we interrogated it, okay, maybe we don't need to ask this. Like, maybe this is just something we can assume.
Yeah.
And we don't need to ask that question because it's not incredibly impactful, and it adds a lot of burden to a customer, especially on a digital journey.
Yeah.
So I think things like that it's just having more empathy for whoever's the user and saying, what do people actually understand? Like, if I throw a bunch of jargon and paperwork at you, you're starting to get nervous, and that's why you needed a 45-minute phone call.
Yeah.
Someone holding your hand to fill it in. Now,
point.
Insure your car on Pineapple, and it takes you probably 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes on our website or on the app, and off you go.
I think, there is the perfect use for AI in itself, where the assumption can be made. That can be where the AI is taught and, like, learned through its deep learning or machine learning of when this car is, from this year model of, say, 2016 to 2018, you can make the assumption of mileage, right? You can probably get that quite exact, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, we use AI in our risk assessments and
Yeah.
our risk modeling and all of that to make the process more user friendly. And I think that goes back to our discussion on AIs. It's all about enhancing the journey of what you're doing or making your job easier. And at some point, it's about making the quality of life for people better. And that's where maybe I'm optimistic, but that's where I hope this road of AI, which the world is embarking on, is going to lead.
100%. Matthew, it is that time, unfortunately. I'm getting told by everyone around us to wrap it up. And I just want to say thank you so much for being our what's the word? Inaugural?
Yeah.
Is it right?
We can go with that.
I'll just say first. We'll simplify it. First guest on Blood, Sweat and Ideas. I think just from sitting here across from you, you've covered a whole range of topics from, the state of SMMEs in South Africa, the competition that's necessary to build an economy across the world, the fact that South Africa has some of the best and innovative insurance businesses, and I think Pineapple fits seamlessly into that. The need for brands to be a little bit more courageous with the way in which they market themselves and have fun doing it. Again, ticked all the boxes in my mind for what you guys have done with your Pineapple Billboard campaign. And then now just the topic of AI. I think you being able to just speak confidently about it and, see it in a positive way, how not only is it going to make as consumers our lives easier when we're utilizing our app, but it's giving people opportunities to have jobs that aren't even created or job titles that don't exist today, because that is the way in which we need to think. We're constantly improving, right? And thanks so much for this conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So the way we're going to
We're not done yet.
No, we're not done. How much time do we have? 30 seconds. So how we're going to end every episode is, what is your question for the next guest?
Okay, for the next guest, my question is, what advice would you give to yourself earlier on in your journey? So what's the thing that you wish you knew beforehand?
That's actually one of my questions I never asked you. Damn it. That's great. We'll make sure to ask our next guest. Thanks so much, Matthew.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.